Welcome to New Rechts, or for our English listeners, New Right. My name is Daniel de Liever, and today we're going to talk about the rights of children in families. And I'm glad today to talk to Katie Faust of Them Before Us. So thank you for being here today.
It's really wonderful to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I actually first heard about you when you had this interview with Jordan Peterson a while back, and I started. I must say it was a very strong interview. So I was like, especially in the Netherlands where we don't really have these kind of conversations, it's good to start, so to speak. So maybe before we really go into the topic about children's rights, maybe you can introduce yourself and for people that don't know as much about you.
Yeah, I started writing about marriage and why marriage is actually a matter of justice for children just on an anonymous blog in 2012. And then I started writing under my own name in about 2014. I started Them Before Us in 2018 because I realized that children needed formal representation on matters that spanned across a variety of different marriage and family issues. It wasn't just the definition of marriage, which is originally what got me started. I realized that in every major area where we're talking about family, whether it is divorce or adoption or modern families or reproductive technologies or what adults get to go on a birth certificate or polyamorous relationships or surrogacy, all of those conversations were obsessively focused on the adults and what the adults wanted. But in all of those conversations, children are significantly harmed when we get the answer wrong. So I started Them Before Us with the purpose of formally advocating on behalf of children. So if I do my job in this conversation, I am going to put a child-centric perspective into this conversation, whether we're talking about the personal or the political.
And why do you think that children in this sense have been left out a little bit out of the equation for such a long time?
First of all, because children can't advocate for themselves. They don't blog. They don't give interviews with, large media organizations in the Netherlands. They can't submit amicus briefs, which is sort of a way for ordinary people to appeal and bring their issue to the attention of the Supreme Court here. They don't hire lawyers. They don't speak at conferences. Children can't defend their own rights. And the problem with marriage and family issues is you run up against some of the strongest self-interest of adults in all of these conversations, whether it is, there's really no adult group that does not come into these conversations without very serious, not just an agenda, but a drive to get what they want. So when you're looking at the redefinition of marriage to expand to gay marriage, you are running up against the self-interest of LGBT adults. When you're looking at a couple that is in a struggling marriage, a heterosexual couple, oftentimes their desire to escape the struggle of that marriage is a lot stronger than the child's right and need to be known and loved and raised by both mother and father every day, all day. When you are looking at somebody that is struggling with infertility, the longing and the drive to have a child is so strong that it can override the child's right to be known and loved by their mother or father, or to be not separated from their birth mother the day that they are born. So in this world of children's rights, where children have a right to life and they have a right to be known and loved by their mother and father, that is going to make demands of every adult at some point. There is no adult group, single, married, gay, straight, fertile, and infertile, who will not have to, at some point, say, I am going to do what's best for kids, even though it goes against my own self-interest. And very few adults are willing to do that.
I do think that's a fair point, and I'm quite curious, what kind of pushback have you had? Because I can understand that, especially as Western countries have become more focused on the needs of the adults, that you might get a lot of angry adults who don't like what you have to say.
Yes. There are angry adult groups in every one of those categories that I just mentioned. There are angry single adults who, when we say your solution to your singleness is not to go down to the sperm bank and create an intentionally fatherless child, they get angry and say, I have a right to motherhood and I haven't found the right person. And so you're telling me that I don't have a right to be happy. This kid is going to be just fine because I make a lot of money and I have enough love for two parents. So married couples get angry because we say you cannot dissolve your marriage because things are uncomfortable or challenging. And they say, oh, you're saying that you want me to live in a miserable marriage? And I'm saying, no, I want you to be the adult and work it out. The gay, the gay lobby gets very angry at us because we're saying two men and two women can never provide children what they need, which is their own mother and father. Modern families where, children are being raised by 1, 2, or 3 people of the same sex always require children lose. And they're saying, oh, you're saying that I have to, this is my identity. My identity is gay. That is just like being Black, or it's just like being Dutch. Like, I can't change this about myself. And our answer is, whatever you think about your sexual orientation, it is much more true that there's a mutable reality that children come from a man and woman, and that man and woman offers distinct benefits to that child. So you need to bend, not the kid. The infertile couples get angry at me because we say, however you're struggling, the solution is not to manufacture children in petri dishes. Select the ones that you want, discard the ones that you don't want, screen a variety of them out of existence through pre-implantation screening or because they're the wrong sex. You don't get to violate children's rights to life just because you want a baby, no matter how noble and natural that is. So do you see what I'm saying is every adult group at some point is going to get angry at this message because we are saying you cannot have everything that you want if it means that children don't get what they need.
I think underlying a lot of the points you're making, maybe we need to start there, is that children need their biological father and mother. And I think nowadays this is not such a self-evident truth. You could say a lot of people would say, indeed, if I just love a child, biological or not, then all is okay. So what is the case that you're making that children need both their biological mother and father?
So not only do children need their mother and father, which we will talk to, children have a right to be known and loved by their mother and father. And that is not something that I invented. That is recognized in the most widely ratified treaty in the world, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, to which the Netherlands is a party. And so this is something that is recognized by your own government as well. So why is it that it's so important that children have this right to their mother and father protected? It is because only those two adults, the two people responsible for the child's existence, do 3 things that distinctly benefit the child. Number 1, the child's own mother and father are statistically the safest, most connected to, most protective of, and most invested in the child's life. We see this played out very starkly when you look at households where a child's mother or father, own biological mother and father, are not in the home. For example, step-parented families or single mothers or a mother with her live-in boyfriend. What do you see in those situations? You see skyrocketing rates of abuse and neglect in those children's homes. There is a direct connection with the child being raised by their married biological mother and father, and protectiveness and connection and investment when it comes to time and money. So you can say love makes a family over and over and over, but that does not replicate the benefits of being raised by a child's own biological mother and father. What else? The two people responsible for a child's existence give them something that children crave, and that is their biological identity. It is very hard for children to answer the question, who am I? If they can't answer the question, whose am I? And so we see children created through third parties, somebody else's egg or somebody else's sperm, or even adopted children struggling to form their identity because they need that contact and information from the two people who gave them life to be able to form a robust, stable identity. And number 3, if a child's right to be known and loved by both biological parents is protected, the child will automatically get the perfect gender balance in the home. They will have a male parent and a female parent. Now, men and women are very different, especially in the theater of child rearing. Men tend to push children to explore limits safely. They expand a child's cognitive development by using adult-sized words with the child. They develop the child's gross motor skills through physicality and rough and tumble play. Mothers tend to emphasize equity and safety. Mothers tend to develop children's fine motor skills because most of the activities they do with the child has to do with the children's fingers. And mothers tend to simplify their language right down to the child's level so the baby understands every word that the mom is saying. This is not a social construct. Men don't switch on a flip switch that says, okay, I am now going to develop my child's gross motor skills by throwing them in the air. This is just how men naturally approach children, and it's critical. When children miss out, when they are raised without a male parent or a female parent, they developmentally suffer, and they very often will fall into a variety of different social ills that will hamper their development throughout life, whether that is high school dropouts, homelessness, involvement with crime, especially when the father is gone, teen pregnancies in girls. So we need to get back to the place where we are recognizing the sociological reality that a child's own biological mother and father do things that no other adult relationship is able to replicate.
All right. And how would you then balance this out when you have, let's say, an imperfect reality? For example, you mentioned adoption. There are cases where you could say that if people live in, let's say you have a girl living in, I don't know, Afghanistan, where to be a girl out there, to put it mildly, is less than perfect. So she has a choice, I guess, to stay there with the biological parents, or maybe to move to a Western country, be adopted, just hypothetically, where at least some of the other sociological benefits or factors are much better for this girl to develop. How would you balance these kind of factors out with, let's say, the harshness of life as it is?
Yeah. So first of all, we need to recognize that adoption is for children. Unfortunately, in a lot of different scenarios, we have talked about adoption as if it is for adults. This is a way for infertile couples to complete their family, or this is a way for gay couples to get kids. Adoption is not about delivering children to adults. Adoption is about replicating and replacing and restoring what children have lost, which is their mother and father. There are situations where a child has been abandoned or genuinely orphaned, whether that is like domestically in sort of a foster care system or overseas in an orphanage situation. In those kinds of situations, number one, we recognize that the child has lost something that the adoptive parents cannot replicate. But then the adults are going to go through a process of screening and vetting to seek to prove that they will love the child as if the child had been born to them. So I don't think that we're talking about, especially in terms of like the Hague Convention on Intercountry Adoption that outlines kind of best practices for adoption. We don't use adoption as a tool of, I'm going to get this child out of the country because they don't have educational opportunities or they're being absolutely oppressed by a backwards 7th century regime that says that women can't even talk to other women in public. Okay. So that's not the way that adoption is understood. Adoption is understood when a child has lost their mother or father, and then we seek to replicate what was lost. Whenever possible, we do that in country because there is a cultural connection that is beneficial to the child. But if the child is not able to be adopted in country, then you can look at inter-country adoption. And in that sense, yes, you would be looking at, that is preferable than living perpetually in an orphanage, especially with, for example, a serious medical diagnosis that the child cannot be, that can't be treated on their own without parents, without resources.
All right. And if you look at the damage so far, you're saying, okay, listen, there's been almost no focus on children's rights. Can you tell me what, in your estimation, has been the damage of this kind of policy to children over time?
So one of the biggest legal damages to children is the redefinition of marriage. What we did when we equated opposite sex marriage with same-sex marriage is we, in essence, made mothers or fathers optional in the life of the child. So when husbands and wives become optional in marriage, mothers and fathers become optional in parenthood laws. And so that is very damaging, because from the child's perspective, their mother or father is never optional. Their mother or father is critical to their identity, to their development, to their safety. And so, unfortunately, we have seen the institution of marriage. Recently, we have looked at the institution of marriage more as a vehicle of adult fulfillment, rather than what it has historically been, which is the most child-friendly institution the world has ever known. Why? Why is it so child-friendly? It is because it is the only relationship that unites the two people to whom children have a natural right, their mother and father, and thereby creating a haven, statistically, of safety. It's connected them to both halves of their heritage, giving them a stable foundation on which to form their identity. It has allowed them the tools and resources needed to have a healthy development. And so, unfortunately, because we have redefined marriage in a way that perhaps satisfies some gay adult groups, it has come at the expense of children's fundamental rights and needs. So that's probably the biggest legal threat that children are facing today.
And what would you say now? I guess in most Western countries, also in the US, also in the Netherlands, in other countries, sadly we see, let's say, the traditional marriages are also kind of falling apart. We see more divorce rates. We see, sadly, that family life in general is being disrupted. And what I hear a lot, especially in the Netherlands, is the argument that, when family life is already so scattered, you're already going to have many children whose rights are going to be abandoned, also by traditional families, traditional marriage as well. So I see that a lot of people saying, okay, if that's the case, then if everyone is going to be imperfect anyway, then what's the problem with also having some other suboptimal relations? What do you think about this kind of argument that I hear, especially in progressive circles, quite a lot?
Well, it is true that it is hard to, especially in this day and age, create the ideal. But don't pretend like there is not an ideal. Like, there is a mountain of social science data that says that children fare best when they're raised in the home of their married biological mother and father in a low conflict relationship. That is absolutely insurmountable. We would like to pretend like there isn't an ideal. Oh, well, everybody's imperfect, everybody stumbles, so it'll be no big deal if I create a situation or a household where the child won't be in a daily relationship with their mother or father, married mother and father. Maybe that's cohabiting. Which, when I said that the greatest legal threat to children was the redefinition of marriage, the greatest threat to children in terms of sheer numbers is adults who are living together but who are not married. That is absolutely widespread, and threatening many more children than gay couples raising kids when it comes to sheer numbers. Cohabitation is inherently risky for children. Children who grow up, well, they rarely grow up with their cohabiting biological mother and father, because without marriage, those relationships tend to be very fragile and unstable. They're much more likely to break up. Even if the parents stay together, those children, research in the United States says, they are 3 times more likely to suffer physical or emotional or sexual abuse. They are much more likely to struggle with drugs and alcohol, and they're 4 times more likely to live in poverty. So this idea that, well, everybody's imperfect, we can't reach the ideal, it's absolutely not true. And it is just a way for adults to, in essence, write themselves a permission slip to create a household that serves them but doesn't serve the children.
Okay, and if we then, let's say that you have convinced people and they're like, okay, you know what, we need to change, maybe both on a political level, also in general, on the societal level, how we deal with the rights of children. Where do you think we could begin? What are the low-hanging fruits that we could take to move a little bit more towards this ideal?
So there's 3 main areas where children's right to their mother and father is being attacked: cultural, legal, and technological. So we've already talked a little bit about the legal attack on the rights of children through marriage redefinition, also through the permission, the granting of no-fault divorces, where you can exit a marriage for any reason, even if there's no abuse, even if there's no adultery. You can just exit the marriage and, in essence, destroy the child's life. Divorce wreaks havoc on children's physical, mental, emotional, academic, and relational health.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got divorce, we've got same-sex marriage, we've got the redefinition of parenthood. So the European Union is pushing a certificate of parenthood across Europe, in essence, of forcing countries, even if they don't have gay marriage, to recognize gay marriage, to force countries to recognize unrelated adults as parents of the child, even if they are not biologically related, even if they didn't go through an adoption process. So if we recognize that children have a right to their mother and father, we would confront and reverse all of those legal movements. But then there's also cultural narrative.
Let me first ask you one question about this legal, because you said about the marriage thing. Let's say that you have your children are all grown up. They are already outside the house. They're 20, 30, 40 years old. Do you still believe that it will be heavily damaging if parents would divorce at that age? Or is it only when you're raising your children, when they actually are children?
Yeah, great question. So that's a phenomenon called gray divorce, where people are getting divorced after their children are out of the home, when their hairs are gray. And what we've actually seen in the United States, at least, is an overall decline of the divorce rate. We're not seeing as many divorces as we used to, mainly because we're not seeing as many marriages. People are shacking up or cohabiting. And so when they break up, it's not counted as a divorce. But for people that are getting married, divorces are declining, except gray divorces. That is the one demographic where we are seeing more people get divorced when their children are out of the home. So we don't have a lot of research on how this impacts kids, but we have a lot of testimonies of how this impacts kids. And here's the problem with it. Very, very often, what that means is the woman who now is 30 or 35 or 40, who has 2 or 3 children of her own, now she sees her parents split. So in essence, what that means is she will now become the caregiver for mother and father, because they're not caring for each other, but she's also caring for her own children. And so what it does is it creates sort of this load-bearing wall on that one middle generation, who then has to support those above her and those below her. Not only that, it's incredibly destabilizing even when you are an adult, because very often your parents stuck it out. You thought that was a firm foundation for you. And now many of those children feel destabilized because they're like, is that all a lie? So while we don't have the numbers on that, if you talk to somebody whose parents divorced when they were in their 20s or 30s, I guarantee you they're not going to have glowing things to say about it.
That's a fair point. Just wanted to point it out, but fair answer. I guess the second thing you want to talk about was the cultural dimension of this.
Yes. And, in the United States, at least, we have had these sort of cultural mantras about marriage and family. Things like biology doesn't matter, love makes a family, which you brought up. A lot of what we're seeing is if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy kind of conversation. Or, especially when it comes to divorce. Well, it's kind of like a bad cold. It's uncomfortable for a while, but the kids will get over it. And so all of these have the same flavor to it, which is elevating and exalting what adults want, their own desires, their own aims, their own longings, to the status of God. And children are the required cultural sacrifice if what adults want sexually or romantically is the most important thing. And all of it is false, right? We actually know what kids need to be happy. And it's not a mom who is, rediscovering a whole new dating world when she's 40. Children deserve, have a right, and benefit to their mother and father loving each other, even if the mom and dad go through seasons where they're not feeling that happy. And so this whole idea that if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy. No, statistically, the kids are going to thrive when their biological mother and father are raising them together for life. We already talked about how the love makes a family, in essence, ignores the biological component to children's needs. And that is always going to have an impact on not just their development, not just their identity formation, but they will be raised in more statistically risky households. So we need to confront the cultural challenges. If we understand that children have a right to their mother and father, we need to rebuke those that are repeating these phrases that in essence will lead adults to separate a child from their mother or father. And then finally, the technological. We have seen an explosion of reproductive technologies that have been victimizing children. IVF, in vitro fertilization, where we are making babies in a petri dish. In the United States, we are killing more little lives through IVF than through abortion every year, because going through IVF means you're not making one baby to implant, you're making 10 or 15 or 20. And many of those are going to be disqualified from life or screened out of existence. They won't survive the thaw. They won't survive the freeze. They won't survive the storage. It's very rare for one of these little lab-made babies to be born alive. And when you're making a baby in a laboratory, it's just as easy to use somebody else's egg or somebody else's sperm to create that baby. But that baby will then grow up not knowing one or both of their biological parents, suffering identity issues, and probably being in a home that statistically is riskier for them. And then there's commercial surrogacy, which allows unrelated adults to create children through rented wombs, who are going to suffer the loss of their mother the day that they are born, which these children have reported increased struggles with trust and attachment and feelings of lifelong abandonment. So we've got all these three areas that, if we really believe children have a right to their mother and father, then we have got to start to speak into the cultural, legal, and technological on behalf of children.
And are you optimistic that we are seeing changes across Western countries when it comes to these different kind of views we can have on children's rights?
I don't know about across the West, but in the United States, I will say that when I first started speaking up in 2018, people, including Christians, would get up and walk out of my talks because they would say, "How dare you confront me? Because I need IVF to have children." When I would share pictures of two men who were holding a newborn in a hospital, and I would say, "This is an injustice. Children need their mothers." The overwhelming response was, "Are you kidding me? That kid is so lucky to have two dads who love them and worked so hard and paid so much money to get them." I'm not seeing as much of that anymore. Now, when I share a picture of two men in a hospital with a newborn baby who has just been removed by their birth mother, there's outrage. There's people saying, whatever politician wants to make this illegal, that's who I'm voting for. And so I do see that there is more of an awareness of how children are being victimized in the area of marriage and family, but it is going to be a long, hard process, because the idea that adult identity or adult sexuality or adult feelings should absolutely govern everything that we think about marriage and family is entrenched. So it's going to be a long time. We're going to have to share a lot of the stories of children who have been harmed before we can overturn that.
And if we take this to them before us, what do you think has been the way that your organization has been received, and what kind of impact have you had over the last few years?
Well, thankfully, there are hundreds of organizations that are fighting to protect children's right to life on matters of abortion, and that's wonderful. But we are the only organization defending children's right to life in areas of reproductive technologies, but especially their right to be known and loved by their mother and father on this side of the womb. And that is a message that has been very helpful and very clarifying, because the way that we talk about this is we're saying cohabitation, modern families, surrogacy, reproductive technologies, divorce, the definition of marriage, these are not separate issues. They're all manifestations of the same question. And the question is, are you respecting or are you violating the rights of children? It's a template over which you can lay any cultural, legal, or technological question and come out with the right answer. Now, the answer is hard to hear, as we talked about, because it means that adults will always have to do hard things. The alternative is the child does hard things for adults, and that is an injustice. So the way that we talk about these issues has allowed us to have, I would say, more influence and opportunity than we deserve, because we are making clear and simplifying issues that seem to be disconnected and complex, but they're not.
Yes, and I think for a long period of time, this has been self-evident, you could say. Let's say that people want to support your work or your organization and they want to follow you. What are the best ways that people could do that if they're listening to this?
Come to thembeforeus.com and subscribe to our newsletter. go down to the Stay Connected button and give us your information, and let us equip you. Let us fill you with so much knowledge, arguments, and the stories of children so that nobody will be able to stand against you. It is us. It is you and ordinary me who has to do this, who has to go to battle on behalf of children, because politicians will not do this. And there's major multinational, well-moneyed, well-funded organizations that are working to dismantle the rights of children in North Dakota and in the Netherlands. Like, it does not matter. Like, they are gunning for kids. So come and let us equip you. We are on all the social media platforms. I'm very active on X. You can find us at Them Before Us. On Instagram. I'm on Instagram. I think it's Katie Faust Official. Come and follow us, and let us fill you with truth about children, who they are, what they need, and what you can do to defend them.
Thank you very much for having this conversation. I'm quite sure that for many of our viewers, this will be a first time thinking about these topics, hearing about them. So thank you for sharing this with, I guess, the Dutch audience.
Yeah, it's really good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And of course, I also want to thank our listeners. If you want to make these kind of conversations possible, please consider subscribing at nieuwrechts.nl, and see you in the next one.